All right, get ready to dive deep because today we're going to unravel the world of textiles.
Ooh,
Yeah,
textiles.
and trust me,
Sounds interesting.
it's way more intricate than just, grabbing a shirt off the rack at the mall.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
We've got this awesome article by Dr. VJ Malik. It's going to be a roadmap today
Okay.
as we try to figure out, how this whole industry works,
Mm-hmm.
what makes a textile company successful,
Mm-hmm.
and, what to watch out for if you're thinking about maybe investing in this sector.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, would be interested in kind of peeking behind the curtain
Right.
of the textile industry, right? It's not something you think about every day,
No, not at all.
but it's a pretty big deal.
It is. It is.
And I think there are a lot of misconceptions about it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. So let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
The textile value chain.
All right.
It's like a journey, right?
It is, yeah.
From like a tiny little fiber, could be natural like cotton or
Yeah.
something man-made,
Right.
all the way to like the clothes we wear,
Yeah.
the stuff hanging in our closets.
It is, yeah, it's a whole process.
That is a whole process.
And it's more complicated than you might think.
Okay, so break it down for us.
Well, think of it like a relay race,
Okay.
with different stages.
Okay.
So you start with the fiber production, then you spin that fiber into yarn,
Got it.
then you weave or knit that yarn into fabric,
Okay.
and then finally you get to the garment creation, the design, the sewing, all of that,
Right, right.
and then finally retail, getting it to the stores and to us.
So to really analyze a company,
Yeah,
you need to know where they fit into that whole relay race.
absolutely. Yeah.
Like what stage are they in?
Because a company that's focused on, say, spinning cotton yarn
Yep.
is going to face very different challenges than
Right.
a company that's designing and selling, high fashion apparel. Yeah, totally different worlds.
And speaking of fibers, I was reading this article,
Yeah.
and I was actually kind of surprised to learn about all this innovation happening with, like, natural materials.
Ah.
It's not just, like, cotton anymore.
No, not at all.
I mean, they're talking about hemp coffee grounds.
Wow.
Even pineapple and banana fibers are finding their way into textiles.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in that area.
That's pretty cool.
A lot of it is driven by sustainability, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
People are looking for more eco-friendly options.
Right, right.
But there's also just a lot of creativity and experimentation going on,
That's awesome.
which is great to see.
Yeah. But I guess, even with all these new and exciting materials,
Mm-hmm.
the actual processes of spinning and knitting,
Yeah,
they often lead to what's called, commodity products.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that can be a challenge.
Okay, why is that?
Well, because commodity products are basically, they're the same no matter who makes them.
Oh, okay.
So yarn and fabric, the specifications are often standardized.
I see.
So it's hard for companies to really stand out.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, how do you differentiate yourself?
Right, when everybody's selling basically the same thing.
Exactly, exactly.
So how do they stand out then? How do these companies make themselves different?
Well, some mills, they manage to kind of break free from that commodity trap.
Okay, how do they do that?
A couple of ways. They might focus on premium quality yarns, like higher thread counts or unique textures.
Oh, okay, so going the extra mile on quality.
Exactly, yeah, adding that something special.
Makes sense.
Some fabric producers, like Raymond, I don't know if you've heard of them.
Oh, yeah.
They've even gone a step further and created their own brands.
Oh, wow.
And they sell directly to consumers.
Oh, interesting.
So they've established what's called a B2C presence,
Okay.
business to consumer. And that allows them to really control their brand narrative and
Right.
build a loyal customer base.
Smart move.
Yeah, it's a good strategy.
Cut out the middleman.
Yeah, exactly.
Go straight to the people who appreciate that high quality stuff.
Exactly.
But let's be real. I mean, the textile industry, at least in India,
Yeah,
is known for being incredibly fragmented.
that is. Yeah.
Tons of smaller players, all competing for a piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of impact does that have?
Well, you've hit on a really crucial point.
Okay.
This fragmentation, it's partly due to government policies
Okay.
that actually encourage small-scale industries, to create jobs.
Right.
But it also means that you have this fiercely competitive environment
I see.
where companies are constantly under pressure
Mm-hmm.
to keep prices low.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that can really squeeze their profit margins.
Especially with those commodity products, right?
Exactly. Yeah, when it's hard to differentiate yourself based on quality.
Right. It all comes down to price.
Yeah. Yeah, and to give you a sense of how tight those margins can be,
Yeah.
ICRA, a credit rating agency, they found that the average net profit margin for spinning mills
Oh, wow.
is a mere 1%.
1%.
Yeah, 1%.
That's razor thin.
It is. It's really tough.
Oh, no.
Fabric and apparel companies, they do a little bit better,
Okay.
around 3%.
Still not a lot of wiggle room.
No, no, no,
No
no.
wonder these companies are constantly searching for an edge.
Yeah, they have to be really smart.
And I have a feeling raw materials
Yes.
play a huge role in this whole, like, industry roller coaster, right?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Raw materials are a major, major factor
Okay, for everyone.
for everybody in the textile value chain.
So whether you're talking about cotton for spinning
Yeah.
or, like, man-made fibers for the synthetics or even, like, the cost of the fabric itself for those garment manufacturers.
It's all about the raw materials.
Okay, so just how big of an impact are we talking about here? Like, give me a sense of scale.
Well, for spinning and fabric production. Okay.
Raw materials can make up something like 60% of the operating expenses.
Okay.
And get this, for apparel companies,
Yeah.
it can be a whopping 60% of their revenue.
60% of revenue. That's a huge chunk.
It's huge. It's a huge chunk.
So any fluctuation in the price of those raw materials, I mean,
Yeah.
that must send shockwaves through the entire industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
And when we talk about price volatility,
Mm-hmm.
cotton is the king.
Cotton, really?
Yeah, cotton prices, they're influenced by everything.
Like what?
Weather patterns, government policies,
Oh, wow.
global market dynamics, you name it.
So it's like a gamble for these companies.
It is, in a way, yeah.
Wow.
Especially for those spinning mills.
Okay.
They have to stock up on cotton during the harvest season.
Right.
But then they risk those prices plummeting later on.
Oh, I see.
So it's a constant balancing act
Yeah.
between, like, securing enough inventory
Right.
and trying to, like, predict the market trends.
So how do they even navigate that?
It's tricky, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. There are some strategies, though,
Okay, I'm all ears.
that companies have developed to kind of,
Help them stay afloat.
stay
Yeah.
afloat and manage that risk.
Okay, let's dive into those.
Okay, sure.
Because I'm curious to hear, like, how they do it.
Well, one of the most important factors is scale.
Scale. You mean like the size of the company?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The bigger the company, the
Yeah.
more cost efficient they can be.
So is it kind of like buying in bulk? Like you get a better price per unit when you're dealing with larger quantities?
It's a similar concept, yeah.
Okay.
Larger players, they can spread their fixed costs
Mm-hmm.
over a much larger volume of production.
Right.
So that lowers their per unit cost.
That makes sense.
And that gives them a big advantage.
Okay.
Especially, when the economy takes a downturn
Right.
and everyone's trying to cut costs.
So size does matter in the textile world.
It does. It really does.
got it.
Especially when you're competing on price,
Right. Right.
which is often the case. Okay, so what about those smaller players? I mean,
yeah.
are they just destined to, like, struggle?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There are ways for them to compete.
Okay.
One option is to focus on niche markets
Oh.
or to specialize in like high value products
Right.
where they can charge a premium price.
So instead of trying to, like, outmuscle the giants,
Yeah,
they find their own little corner of the market and excel there.
exactly. Yeah, find their own niche.
Okay.
And that brings us to another crucial factor.
Okay.
Capital, money, money, money.
Right. Right.
We're not just talking about like physical space and machinery.
Yeah.
It's also about managing inventory
Okay.
and the money that's tied up in outstanding payments.
Oh, right. The cash flow.
The cash flow, exactly.
I bet that's a major headache for these textile companies,
It is. It can be a real challenge.
especially with those raw material prices constantly fluctuating.
Absolutely, they have to juggle.
Yeah.
What's called fixed capital, those big investments in like machinery and infrastructure,
Right.
and working capital, which is the money that keeps the day-to-day operations running.
Got it. So how much money are we talking about here? Like, just to give me an idea?
Well, setting up a spinning plant
Okay.
with, say, around 25,000 spindles can easily cost you like 90, 100 crore.
That's a serious chunk of change.
It is. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. And then you've got those cotton spinning mills we talked about.
Yeah.
The ones that are, like, stockpiling cotton during the harvest.
Right.
I mean, that's going to tie up a ton of working capital.
It does. It's a big risk.
And then if cotton prices drop after they've made those purchases,
Uh-oh.
they're stuck.
Yeah, they're stuck with a loss.
It's like they're playing game of chicken with the market.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Wow.
But there are ways to, mitigate that risk.
Okay. How do they do that?
Well, one way is through diversification.
Okay, diversification.
Instead of betting everything on like one type of fiber or yarn, yeah, they spread their risk by producing a variety of products.
So like a balanced investment portfolio.
Exactly. Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right, right.
So a spinning mill, for example, they might use a mix of cotton and man-made fibers,
Okay.
or they might produce like different yarn counts
That's it.
to appeal to a wider range of customers.
Okay.
Fabric makers, they might experiment with different fabric weights or finishes
Yeah.
to offer more variety.
All right.
And apparel companies, they often launch multiple brands
Oh, interested.
to target different customer segments.
So diversification makes a lot of sense.
It does. It's a key strategy.
Okay, but is there anything else they can do to boost those profit margins? Can we talk about how razor thin they are?
Yeah, well, another strategy is premiumization.
Premiumization, what's that?
So instead of getting caught in that race to the bottom on price,
Right.
they try to move up the value chain
Okay.
by developing like unique, specialized products
Right.
that can command a premium price.
So it's about like creating something that people are willing to pay extra for.
Exactly.
Something that stands out.
Something special, something different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, a spinning mill might specialize in like high count yarns that are used in like luxury apparel.
Ooh.
Or a fabric maker might develop like innovative high performance fabric
I see.
with unique properties.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how these strategies can help
Yeah.
overcome some of those challenges we talked about.
It's all about being strategic.
But what about the global market?
Yes.
How do Indian companies stack up against that international competition?
That's a great question, and it's one that will Indian companies face some significant hurdles
Okay.
when they try to compete on the world stage.
All right. Well, we'll
Facing some pretty tough competition out there in the global market.
okay, so let's talk about those global challenges. What are the biggest hurdles for Indian companies trying to make their mark on the international scene?
Well, one of the biggest is cost competitiveness. Companies in places like China and Bangladesh, they often have lower labor and production costs,
Right.
which means they can offer products at more competitive prices.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's that whole thing of trying to balance quality with affordability.
Exactly. And it's not just labor costs either. Government policies can have a huge impact.
Oh, in what way?
Well, things like export incentives and customs regulations can really affect a company's ability to compete globally.
So I guess those policies could either be a help or a hindrance, depending on how they're structured.
Exactly. For example, India Ratings, they're a credit rating agency.
Hmm.
They pointed out that export incentives for Indian textile companies can be as low as 2% to 7% of revenue.
Wow, that doesn't sound very generous. How does that compare to other countries?
Well, in some cases, those incentives can be significantly higher, which gives companies in those countries a real advantage when it comes to pricing their products for export.
I see. So there's that external pressure from competing countries. But what about internal challenges? Are there things that Indian companies themselves could do to improve their competitiveness?
Definitely. One key area is efficiency. Streamlining production processes, adopting new technologies, optimizing supply chains.
Just working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And another important factor is innovation. Developing new and innovative products, especially ones with unique features or performance characteristics that can help companies command higher prices and stand out from the competition.
So it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with premiumization. Find that niche, offer something special that people are willing to pay a premium for.
Exactly.
Okay.
And don't underestimate the importance of branding and marketing. In a global marketplace where consumers have so many choices, building a strong brand and communicating your value proposition effectively can make all the difference.
Right. It's not just about making a great product. It's about telling a compelling story
Yeah.
and connecting with those consumers.
You got it. And that's especially true in the apparel segment where fashion trends, brand loyalty, and consumer perceptions play a huge role.
Okay, so there's a lot to consider when competing on the global stage. It's not just about making high-quality goods at a good price. It's about navigating all these different factors, from government policies to labor costs to innovation and branding. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about something you mentioned earlier, vertical integration.
Okay.
You explained that this can help companies gain more control over their supply chain, but I'm curious to hear a bit more about how it works in practice.
Sure. Well, think of the textile value chain as a series of steps. You start with the raw materials, then you have the spinning, the weaving or knitting, the dyeing and finishing, and finally the garment manufacturing. Vertical integration means that a company decides to handle more of those steps themselves.
Okay, so instead of relying on outside suppliers for different parts of the process, they bring more of it in-house.
Exactly. So, for example, a spinning mill might decide to go what's called backward in the chain and acquire or partner with a cotton farm.
Okay.
This gives them more control over the quality and the supply of their raw materials.
Oh, interesting. So they're cutting out the middleman and ensuring they have a steady stream of exactly the cotton they need.
Right. Or an apparel company might go forward in the chain and set up their own fabric manufacturing unit. This gives them more control over the design quality and production timing of their fabrics, which can be a huge advantage in the fast-paced fashion world.
That makes sense. It's all about reducing reliance on external factors and streamlining the whole process. But I'm guessing there are some downsides to vertical integration as well.
There are It requires significant upfront investment, and it can make companies less flexible in responding to changes in demand. So it's a trade-off between control and agility.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, more like a strategic tool that companies need to use carefully.
Exactly. And that's true for all the strategies we've discussed. There's no magic bullet for success in the textile industry.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about. We've covered the complexities of the value chain, the challenges of commodity products, the volatility of raw material prices, and the different strategies companies use to stay afloat.
Yeah.
And we even touched on the hurdles they face in the global market. But now I'm curious, what does all this mean for the average person? Why should we as consumers care about any of this?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore as we wrap up our deep dive in the next segment, because understanding how the textile industry works can actually help you make more informed choices as a consumer.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's dive into that consumer perspective. All right, so we're back, ready to wrap up our textile deep dive. And I'm really curious to hear, like, how all this industry knowledge can actually make me, a smarter shopper.
Well, it's funny because
Yeah.
understanding how the textile industry works, it really can empower you as a consumer.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
Well, first of all, it helps you appreciate
Yeah.
the complexity behind the clothes you're wearing. You start to see that a simple T-shirt
Yeah.
is actually the result of a really long and complicated journey
Right.
involving, farmers, spinners, weavers, dyers,
Wow.
so many people.
It's like you don't really know a person
Right.
until you've walked a mile in their shoes.
Exactly.
But in this case, it's like understanding the journey of a T-shirt.
Yeah, from the cotton field to your
So
closet.
exactly.
Yeah.
And once you have that understanding,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you start asking different questions when you're shopping, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, what kind of fibers were used?
Mm-hmm.
Were they sustainably sourced?
Yeah.
What are the working conditions like for the people who made my clothes?
Those are all really important questions.
So it's not just about looking good.
Right.
It's about, like, making conscious choices
Exactly.
that align with your values.
And that's where understanding things like premiumization
Yeah.
and vertical integration comes in handy.
Okay.
If a company's vertically integrated,
Mm-hmm.
they might have more control over their supply chain,
Right.
which could mean, better working conditions,
Yeah.
more sustainable practices.
That makes sense. But how can I tell if a company's vertically integrated?
Well, it's not always obvious.
Yeah.
But some companies will actually highlight it
Okay.
as a selling point,
Right.
They might talk about their commitment to ethical sourcing
Wow.
or their partnerships with specific farms or factories.
It's like a bit of detective work.
Yeah, a little bit.
But the clues are there
They are if you know what to look for.
if you know what to look for.
And don't forget the power of just asking questions.
Right.
Don't be afraid to reach out to brands directly
Good point.
and inquire about their manufacturing processes, their sustainability initiatives.
The more we as consumers demand that transparency,
Yeah,
the more likely companies are to provide it. Right.
absolutely. And that's what's so exciting about this.
Yeah.
Growing awareness,
Mm.
We're not just passive consumers anymore. We're
Yeah.
becoming active participants in
Yeah.
shaping a more sustainable and ethical fashion industry.
I love that. So to wrap things up,
Yeah.
what's like the one key takeaway
Okay.
you'd want our listeners to remember from our textile deep dive?
I would say the textile industry is a fascinating and complex ecosystem
It is.
that touches all of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And while it faces, some serious challenges,
Yeah.
there's also a lot of innovation and positive change happening.
Right.
And by becoming more informed consumers,
Yeah.
we can actually support the companies that are doing things the right way
Yeah.
and encourage the whole industry to move towards a more
Yeah.
sustainable and ethical future.
Well said. I think we've all learned a lot today
I hope so.
about the hidden world of textiles.
Yeah.
It's definitely made me think differently about, like, the clothes I buy
Good.
and the impact those choices have.
That's the goal.
So, awesome. Thanks for joining us on this textile adventure.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep into the world around you.
Keep learning.